The road at night is a different world. For a long-haul trucker like me, it was my office, my home, and sometimes my own personal purgatory. The endless blacktop of Highway 9 unspooled before my rig, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the sleeping heart of the country. The only sounds were the deep rumble of my engine and the whisper of the wind against the cab. The world outside my windshield was a void, punctuated only by the distant, lonely lights of a farmhouse or the reflective eyes of some unseen animal in the brush. I've driven this route 1,000 times, but on this particular night, the familiar felt foreign. A heavy fatigue was settling deep into my bones, the kind that coffee couldn't touch. The white lines on the road began to blur, pulling me into a state of highway hypnosis, a dangerous trance where your mind drifts and the miles just melt away. The loneliness wasn't just around me, it was inside me, a constant companion on these long dark journeys. But on that night, on Highway 9, it was something else entirely. Something that would change the road for me forever. It started as a flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible blip of movement at the far reach of my high beams. At first, I dismissed it. My tired mind was known for conjuring phantoms out of the darkness, but then I saw it again. This time it was clearer. It was small, too small to be a deer. It looked like a person, a child. My heart thumped hard. What would a kid be doing out here, miles from anywhere? The logical part of my brain screamed it was impossible, another hallucination brought on by too many hours behind the wheel. I eased my foot off the accelerator, the big rig slowing with a deep groan. The figure was motionless, standing perfectly still as my headlights grew closer. It was definitely a child. I could make out the shape of a small frame, maybe a light-colored shirt. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. This wasn't right. The scene was too strange, too out of place. No cars, no houses, just the empty road and the solitary small figure waiting. The initial flicker of movement had now resolved into a solid, undeniable presence. It was real, and it was waiting for me. A war broke out inside my head. One voice told me to keep going. Don't stop, it's a trap. I'd heard stories, roadside ambushes, decoys luring drivers into stopping. But another voice, the voice of a father, asked, what if it was real? What if a child was genuinely lost and in trouble? The thought of my own daughter, alone in the dark, was a sharp jab to my heart. How could I live with myself if I just drove on by? My foot hovered between the gas and the brake. I had seconds to decide. The two arguments screamed at each other in my mind. It's a setup! It's a child in need! In the end, the father in me won. I couldn't drive away. With a heavy sigh, I flicked on my hazard lights and began to gently apply the brakes. The air brakes hissed, shattering the nocturnal silence. I pulled over onto the wide shoulder about 50 yards past the spot where the child was standing. I wanted to keep a safe distance to assess the situation. The engine idled, the only sound besides my frantic heartbeat. I had stopped. Now what? Leaving the engine running was my lifeline. The headlights pinned the small figure in their glare. I grabbed my mag light, its metal body cold in my trembling hand. The road was empty in both directions, just me and the kid, isolated in this bubble of light and fear. I took a deep breath and pushed the cab door open. The night air hit me with a chill. The sound of the idling engine was a comforting roar in the oppressive silence. The beam of my mag light cut a sharp circle in the darkness. My boots crunched on the gravel as I walked, rehearsing what I'd say. Hey there, are you okay? Are you lost? But inside I was a wreck. Every shadow seemed to move. The 50 yards between my truck and the child felt like a mile. The figure hadn't moved an inch, just stood there, a small silhouette against the headlights. A lost child should be crying or running towards help, not standing like a statue. I called out, my voice rough. Hello kid, you all right out here? The only answer was the thrum of my engine. The child didn't respond. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. I forced myself closer, each step deliberate and measured. The air grew heavy, thick with an anticipation I couldn't quite place, until I was only about 15 feet away. Close enough to make out details, but still far enough to make a quick escape if needed. Now I could see the child clearly, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness, painting him in stark relief. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, in oddly clean clothes. It was strange, almost unsettling how pristine they were given the circumstances. His face was blank, devoid of emotion, an empty canvas in the harsh glare of my light. No fear, not even a flicker, no relief, no sign that he even registered my presence, just a vacant stare at the ground, as if the asphalt held some terrible secret. Something was profoundly wrong. This wasn't just a lost child, this was something else entirely. A child in this situation should be hysterical, or at least distressed, clinging to any sign of hope. This boy was unnervingly calm, a stillness that felt unnatural, almost predatory, almost catatonic, like a broken doll left out in the rain. His posture was rigid, unyielding, arms hanging stiffly at his sides like weights pulling him down. He looked less like a lost child, vulnerable and scared, and more like a mannequin placed on the side of the road, a silent sentinel guarding some unseen boundary. I tried again, softer. "Hey son, my name is Frank. Are your parents nearby? Was there an accident?" I kept my voice gentle, trying not to startle him further. He didn't react at all, not even a twitch. It was as if I hadn't spoken, as if my words were just vibrations in the air, never reaching his ears. The air around him felt cold, unnaturally so, a chill that seeped into my bones despite the summer night. The normal night sounds had faded away, the crickets, the distant hum of traffic, all gone. All that remained was the low rumble of my truck, a mechanical heartbeat in the oppressive silence, and the heavy thudding of my own blood in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching dread. The initial fear of an ambush was being replaced by a different kind of terror, something more primal and strange, something that whispered of things beyond my understanding. I decided to get a little closer, despite the growing unease, to see if he was hurt or in shock or if there was any sign of what had happened to him. As I moved, my flashlight beam traveled up from his feet, illuminating his worn sneakers. Across his clean jeans, too clean for a child who should be lost and scared, his plain t-shirt, unremarkable in every way. And then I saw it, the detail that shattered the illusion. It wasn't just the boy's strange demeanor that was wrong, the unsettling stillness, the vacant eyes. There was something else, something far more disturbing lurking beneath the surface, something attached to him, an unseen presence clinging to his very being. My cautious approach came to an abrupt halt, my feet frozen to the asphalt. I was no longer looking at a lost child, a victim of circumstance, a boy in need of help. I was looking at a horror I couldn't comprehend, a glimpse into a reality that defied explanation. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Clinging to the boy's back with long, spindly limbs wrapped around his small torso was a creature. It was dark and thin, like something made of burnt twigs and old leather, its limbs jointed at odd angles. Two of them were wrapped tightly around the boy's chest, two more dug into his shoulders. Its head rested on the boy's shoulder, with two large, luminous eyes glowing a sickly yellow. Those eyes fixed directly on me. Ancient, malevolent, hungry. The world seemed to tilt. All I could see were those eyes staring at me from the shoulder of a silent, unmoving child. The creature was perfectly still, fused with the boy breathing as he breathed, though neither seemed to breathe at all. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, my mind struggled to accept it. The boy was not a victim of a simple accident. He was a vessel, a puppet, and the thing on his back was the puppeteer. My fear was no longer rational. It was a deep, soul-shaking terror that bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. I had stumbled upon something not meant for human eyes, and now, that secret was looking right at me. The silence was finally broken, but not by the boy. The voice came from him, but it was not his. It was a dry, rasping sound, like stones grinding together. The creature spoke through him, using him like a grotesque ventriloquist dummy. "Help us!" the voice rasped, the words clicking and popping with an unnatural cadence. The plea was simple, but the voice was a symphony of horror. The creature's glowing yellow eyes never left my face. The boy remained a statue, a mere conduit for this terrifying entity. My mind reeled. Help them? What did they want? A ride? The thought of letting that thing into my cab was unthinkable. My urge to help had curdled into a desperate need for self-preservation. The creature and the boy were one, and their request was a trap. The voice came again, more insistent. "We are cold. The vehicle. We need the vehicle." It wasn't asking. It was demanding. The creature wanted my truck. It had been waiting here, on this lonely stretch of road for someone to stop. For a ride. For a way to get somewhere else. I was its ticket. My truck was its vessel. I had stopped for a monster and it wanted to hitch a ride. That was it. The spell was broken, the illusion shattered. The creature's demand snapped me out of my terrified paralysis, jolting me back to reality. The instinct for survival took over completely. There was only one thought, one driving need. Get away, and get away now. I turned and ran with every ounce of strength I could muster. My boots pounded against the gravel, each footstep echoing loudly, the sound deafening in the night. I didn't dare look back, afraid I'd see the boy and the creature scurrying after me. gaining ground with every stride. The 50 yards back to my truck felt like a marathon, an endless stretch of ground separating me from safety. The rumble of my truck's engine was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. I reached the cab, fumbled with the door, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I scrambled inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it with a desperate click. I lunged for the gear shift, released the parking brake, my movements frantic and clumsy, and stomped on the accelerator with all my might. The engine roared, protesting the sudden demand, and with a lurch the truck began to move forward. I didn't look in my mirrors, not even for a split second. I kept my eyes fixed, laser-focused, on the road stretching out ahead of me. The truck gained speed rapidly, putting as much distance as possible between me and the horror on the shoulder of Highway 9. The image of the boy and the creature was burned into my mind, seared into my memory. A permanent scar, a haunting reminder of what I had witnessed. I drove for 2 hours straight without stopping. The weight of what I'd seen, what I'd experienced, pressed down on me. I needed to get away, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that. My foot pressed hard on the accelerator. I pushed the engine, ignoring the strain, desperate to escape the memory that clung to me like a shroud. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, but the light brought no comfort. It only illuminated the fear etched on my face, the exhaustion that had settled deep in my bones. When I finally pulled into a truck stop, the first one I saw, I knew I couldn't go any further. I was a wreck. A broken man behind the wheel of a machine. I stumbled out of the cab, every muscle screaming in protest, my legs weak and trembling, barely able to support my weight. I felt like I was going to collapse right there in the parking lot. Another driver, a grizzled veteran with kind eyes, asked if I was okay. I just shook my head, unable to speak, the words caught in my throat. That was my last haul. The end of the line. I called my dispatcher, my voice cracking with emotion, and told him I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. I left the rig there, the keys on the dashboard, the engine cooling, called a cab, needing to get away as soon as possible, and bought a one-way ticket home, a desperate attempt to return to some semblance of normalcy. I left everything behind, severing ties with that life, my logbook, filled with countless miles and endless nights, my belongings, the few possessions I had accumulated on the road, my career, the identity I had forged on the highways of America. The open road, which had once meant freedom, adventure, and the promise of something new around every bend, now felt like a place of profound danger, a haunted landscape filled with unseen horrors. Even now, years later, the memory still haunts me. I can't sleep without a light on. The darkness is too much, too reminiscent of those endless nights on the road. Every time I close my eyes, trying to find some peace, I see him, the boy with the vacant stare, his eyes hollow and empty, and the thing on his back, a dark and malevolent presence that I can't quite describe. I hear that voice, a desperate plea, asking for help, echoing in my mind, demanding my vehicle, as if it had some right to it, a chilling sense of entitlement. My wife says I came back a different man, and I know she's right. Quieter, more anxious, always looking over my shoulder, expecting something to be there. I never drove a truck again, and I never will. I got a local job, working in a warehouse, something safe and predictable. Coming home every night to my family, to the comfort and security of my loved ones. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and still, when I hear a truck's air brakes hiss in the distance, a sound that used to be so familiar, I feel a cold chill, a primal fear that grips me from the inside out. I wonder if the boy is still out there on some lonely stretch of highway, waiting for another ride, another unsuspecting soul to fall prey to whatever darkness follows him. I know my story sounds unbelievable, like something ripped from the pages of a dime store horror novel. People would say I was hallucinating from fatigue, that the long hours and endless miles had finally taken their toll. They'd argue that my mind was playing tricks on me, conjuring up phantoms in the dead of night to break the monotony. But I always come back to the same chilling details, the things that logic can't explain and that continue to haunt my waking hours. The boy's unnatural calmness, a stillness that defied the late hour and the desolate surroundings, the creature on his back, a grotesque parody of innocence that clung to him like a second skin, and that voice, a raspy whisper that seemed to slither directly into my mind. The terror was real, a primal fear that gripped me with icy fingers and hasn't let go since. And the change it made in me was real, a subtle but undeniable shift in my perception of the world. This is a world full of mysteries, a vast and intricate tapestry woven with threads of the unknown. Sometimes the greatest unknowns are found not in distant galaxies or ancient ruins, but in the lonely, forgotten places right here on Earth, the forgotten stretches of highway that crisscross our country. We think we know the world, that we've mapped its every corner and cataloged its every secret, but there are shadows, lurking just beyond the reach of our understanding. Corners of reality we are not meant to see, glimpses into a world that exists alongside our own, unseen and often terrifying. I stumbled into one of those corners, a place where the veil between worlds thins and the unimaginable becomes real. I saw something I can never unsee, an image seared into my memory that replays itself every time I close my eyes. So, this is my warning, a desperate plea whispered into the void. To anyone who travels the lonely roads when the world is asleep, the truckers, the insomniacs, the wanderers, be careful. Trust your instincts, that primal sense that warns you when something is amiss. If you see something that doesn't feel right, something that sends a shiver down your spine, don't stop, don't be a hero, don't let your conscience override your survival instinct. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is drive on. Some things are not meant to be helped, some doors are better left unopened. Some things are not what they seem, and their innocent facade hides something far more sinister. Some things are just waiting for an invitation, a moment of weakness, a flicker of compassion. I don't know what that thing was or where it wanted to go, what dark purpose drove it forward, and I don't want to know. I've learned that some questions are best left unasked. All I know is that it's out there, somewhere in the vast expanse of the night. It's patient, willing to wait for the opportune moment, and it's waiting, lurking in the shadows, for someone to make a mistake. So if you're ever driving, alone in the darkness, down a deserted highway late at night when the world is hushed and still, and you see a lone figure on the shoulder, a child perhaps, or an old woman, keep your foot on the gas. Don't stop. Some mysteries are best left unsolved, some doors are best left unopened, and some roads are best left untraveled.